What's up, fellow gamer? How does this idea sound to you? We mix the warring stage history of a certain Asian land, including names of historical figures, and add in some shonen anime sensibilities. And by sensibilities, I mean the full wackiness you'd expect from anime. Sounds cool, right? If you're anything like me, who grew up on the hack and slash games of the PlayStation 2, that description might sound a lot like Dynasty Warriors. Great series, but you know I'm talking about Sengoku Basara. After all, you read the title of this video. Recently, I've been delving into the Sengoku Basara franchise, which is quite popular in Japan, but it took a while for us in the West to experience it. So that's it. Without further ado, let's talk about it. 'One of the things that captivates me the most about the game, like I alluded to in the beginning, is the fact it is based on the history of Japan, most specifically the Sengoku period, which can be translated as the Warring States. So when you hear names like Masamune Date or Yukimura Sanada, they aren't just fictional characters, but actual samurai that lived and fought in that period. I'm a history buff, so that only makes the game all the more special. It's a great gateway to start learning about history, the intrigue, the strategies and feats of the time, and so on. I enjoy books such as Sun Tzu's The Art of War and Musashi Miyamoto's The Book of Five Rings, so one thing leads to another. You start playing a game and all of a sudden you've immersed yourself in Asian history. Who says gaming can teach you anything, huh? So after gushing over the game being based on history, I gotta talk about the first release. The first game in the series Japan got was Sengoku Basara, whereas the Western version was Devil Kings. Since Devil King is another moniker to Nobunaga Oda, the main villain, and the Devil May Cry games were huge hits, Capcom decided that as the game's title, and you can even notice they really wanted to make that association by using the Devil May Cry font in the title. The title is not the only change. Capcom decided to remove all references to Japanese history and make the game be based on a fantastical world that could be anywhere. And along with that, characters were no longer historical figures. So you get Azure Dragon instead of Masamune Date, Scorpio instead of Sanada Yukimura, Reaper for Akechi Mitsuhide, and Frost for Uesugi Kenshin. Zavi was turned into Cue Ball? Yeah, I get it, Capcom. The dude is bald, but too on the nose. The thing is, in my view, all these changes take away from the charm of the game. Even if a player has no clue who these characters are, I'd much rather play as Kenshin than Frost. In an interview with IGN, which I'll link in the description, the producer Hiroyuki Kobayashi reveals that up to that point, Capcom had put out many titles that sold well overseas, like Resident Evil and Devil May Cry, so they wanted something new. Something they knew would sell well in Japan. Hence, they tackled the Muso-style game that was monopolized by Koei. Dynasty Warriors sold well in Japan, so they decided to try and take a piece of that pie, but naturally putting some Capcom flair on their game. But when it comes to the Western release, it's a totally different vibe and not as cool as the Japanese release in my humble opinion. One can clearly read between the lines that Capcom didn't believe Western audiences would enjoy a game based on Japanese history. However, by the time Sengoku Basara hit the shelves in 2005, Dynasty Warriors was already in its fifth installment, and Samurai Warriors, from the same studio and also based on Feudal Japan, had its first installment hit the market the year prior. Dynasty Warriors being unapologetically based on Chinese history had success in the West, so I think Senba could clearly compete with them on the same level. Based on some sales charts, up until Dynasty Warriors 5, games would ship in the millions, so clearly there was a market for that in the West as well. Okay, now that we can agree that between Sengoku Basara and Devil Kings, Senba is clearly the cooler Daniel, let's move on to talk about the game. Sengoku Basara, like mentioned before, takes place during a state of much turmoil in Japan, where different factions were vying to control and unify the land, one of them being the villain, the great unifier, Nobunaga Oda. You start with a few characters and unlock more as you play, and each of them will have an ending. Similar to a fighting game in which there's an overarching plot, but each character wins the tournament. And if those endings are canon, that's another story. In Basara's case, the winning the tournament is the unification of Japan. Some characters are leaders of their nation and they usually have allies, like Takeda Shingen being the leader having Sanada Yukimura and his shinobi Sasuke Sarutobi as allies. Another example would be Uesugi Kenshin having as ally Kasuga, my favorite character in the game for obvious reasons, and I'll come back to her later. Now, the gameplay. Like Dynasty Warriors, you'll be thrown into a field and the main goal is to defeat the opponent army's leader, with a few variations on some stages like having to prevent messengers from reaching the leader or having to lead one of your bombers to a gate so you can blast it open. Your character will be capable of tackling hundreds of enemy soldiers, which give you XP, and there are the named officers who will drop a box containing perhaps a new weapon, an upgraded version of your existing one, or an item that can give you a special perk. Before leaving a battle, you can equip these items that have a variety of uses, such as increasing a character's speed, giving them more armor, increasing attack power, and so on. One of the gameplay hooks of the game is defeating as many named officers as you can to get these boxes to try and obtain new items. The game might be a bit button mashy, but once you get the hang of your unique skill, which is your ability attached to the triangle button, you can cancel your normal string of attacks into it to build some strategy or cause more damage depending on the situation. And let us not forget your super attack that will help you defeat several soldiers at once and get you out of any tough spot. As you level up, your character will get new unique skills so you can mix and match depending on your taste. Aside from the main campaign, the game features a free mode in the gallery with some unlockables such as artwork, character bios, CG cutscenes, the anime cutscenes, audio clips, soundtrack, and a section explaining the history behind some of the stages. Quite a lot of stuff, to be honest. That's great. And yeah, you might have noticed, all in Japanese. Well, this is a Japanese release, so we don't get any translations, and I wasn't able to find any translations of Sengoku Basara 1, but you can get around it using Google Translate, so no biggie. Or you can just learn Japanese and play the game, which is much cooler, much more badass. Now let's talk character designs a bit more. What I love about this concept is getting a piece of history, adding some fictional insanity to it, in this case the whole bombastic shonen anime style, and creating some larger-than-life characters not just in personality but also in their designs. So, instead of having the classic samurai look, the characters are all quite unique while still keeping some samurai-esque elements to their designs. Instead of a more generalized feudal-themed roster, you have a bunch of colorful and distinct characters. Even the two ninja are quite distinct in the sense that they don't look like the regular shinobi one might think, well, like wearing all black, covering their faces, you know, the classic ninja look. Here's a picture of Sasuke Sarutobi with his green camouflage and Kasuga. Yeah, Kasuga looks awesome. You think this is a ninja? Nah, son, this is a ninja. Jokes aside, yeah, just like Naruto, Kasuga doesn't immediately resemble the classical ninja, but that's what I find interesting about it. Uniqueness. But she will still feature some ninja tropes like the fishnet motive, running animation, and special moves. And tell you what, Capcom knew exactly what they were doing when they designed Kasuga. Need proof? This is how she appears as a boss fight. With that black snug-fitting catsuit, Kasuga reminds me of Bayonetta. By the way, Kasuga's ally is Kenshin, like I mentioned before, and you want to know how I can quickly summarize what he's all about? Kenshin is this game's Virgil. Take a look. Still on the subject of characters, it's interesting to think that Capcom made extrapolated versions of these historical figures both visually and in personality, but if you look closely, you still notice some authenticity. For instance, the legendary samurai Masamune Date, the one-eyed dragon who apparently pulled out his own sick eye lest it became a liability, was known for being fierce, brash, and belligerent. And he has some of that reflected in Date featured in-game, who is always energetic, eager for a fight, and looks badass wielding 6 katana like a freaking Wolverine. Each character is quite unique. You have Yukimura Sanada, another energetic and fiery character, the stern leader Shingen, the laid-back Sasuke, Tadakatsu, who is a mix of samurai and Gundam, including those distinct mecha sound effects. And Mitsuhide Akechi, who seems to be extremely satisfied at the end of his special attack. I didn't go through all the characters in this video, but let me close the subject with an intriguing one. Zavi, or Zabi as they call in game. He's based on Saint Francis Xavier, a missionary born in Spain who spread Christianity throughout Asia, including Japan. Apparently, he had difficulties learning the language, and that's even reflected in the game. Zabi is clearly one of the comic relief characters, and you can notice his Japanese accent is very exaggerated and has a few quirks to mimic a foreigner.
よく来ましたね。かわいいコーヒー次。私のラブゲートが。死んでも私の胸で眠れるので。ドビドビドビドビドビドビド。愛と勇気だけが心の友です。愛を知りなさい。デートオアラブです。Come on.
His design does make him look like a monk, such as the distinct baldness on top of his head and black robe, but he's built like a tank and is strapped to the teeth. Although not the best character to play in the game, he definitely made me laugh. His antagonist in the game is Itsuki, who, like Kasuga, is a fictional character created for this game, and she is a hammer-wielding child who represents the peasants. Even her army is composed of people fighting with hoes instead of swords. Additionally, Itsuki is quite adorable. Look at her idle animations. She must be having a good time, eh? Oh, look at these other animations. That's so charming. And if you think she doesn't look like much, she's actually a fun character to play, since she has a lot of sweeping attacks with a hammer and one of the best special moves against huge crowds of enemies. So, the character who represents a priest has connections with another character who is a child. Capcom, what are you doing? Is there some kind of dark joke in there? Am I reading too much into this? Oh dear. If you intend to play the game, let me tell you something about the difficulties. There's normal, difficult, ultimate, and omikuji when you beat the game with all characters. The normal difficulty doesn't offer too much of a challenge, but in the later difficulties, the characters, especially the bosses, tend to be just damage sponges, so that becomes more of a nuisance than a fun challenge. Alright, so far I went through the gameplay, characters, and setting, but what is a game without soundtrack? There are some bangers in this game, so I'll play a few examples for your hearing pleasure. And dear viewer, wait, there's more! If you're watching this channel, I imagine you're a fine man or woman of culture who enjoys games, movies, and anime, so I have to mention Sengoku Basara Samurai Kings. It goes to show how Capcom really went all in on the success of the franchise. The series was developed by Production IG from other great anime such as Ghost in the Shell Standalone Complex. After watching through the whole anime, I can safely recommend because it has the bombastic action you'd expect from the concept of super-powered samurai fighting, plus the character development you'd expect in a series, plus the great animation done by Production IG. Lastly, it wouldn't be complete without a banger of an opening theme, so I'll do you a favor and also put it in the description for you to enjoy. That's about it, guys. My intention, just like Zavi, spreading the word and indoctrinating his teachings about love. I hope I was able to spread the word and indoctrinate you into giving Sengoku Basara a chance. If you enjoy hack and slash or Dynasty Warriors, I imagine you'll have a fun time playing this game. And if you're still in doubt, let me give you another reason to play this game. Alright guys, until the next video, now go get crazy, samurai! Say yo, is that not